In today's video, we do a bunch of little details to get the Cobra ready for its first go-kart drive. It's been a few days since I finished the last video, so I probably should catch you up on what I was doing here, which is clearly a lot. I kind of have gotten to a phase where there are a whole lot of little details to do, and my OCD, ADD, whatever you want to call it, brain is having a hard time figuring out which ones to go after. And I think that's going to be pretty common when you get to this phase of the project, because anything that you decide on and anything you close up is going to impact how easily you can do other things. And at some point you just have to make a decision and move forward on things. So as you can see, I got a lot of the carpet installed, and I think it looks pretty decent, all things considered. I also have put the driver's seat in place. It is not bolted down or anything, but I wanted to play around with placement a little bit. Got the seat belts put in. I'm going to need to shorten the shoulder bits some. I haven't yet done anything with the transmission tunnel to close that up, and that was for a couple of reasons. So first one was I wanted to get the wiring harness as well as the air conditioning hoses secured. And so what I ended up doing was I put some cushion clamps and riveted those into the frame. One thing I'll say is that at this point I'm somewhat questioning how good of an idea it was to run these up higher like this. It probably would have been better to try to run them lower along a couple of the main frame rails. Certainly would make them more accessible, but this will end up working. I figured out where I want to put the holes for both my USB charger / voltmeter, which is what this is going to be, and then also for the seat heater plugs. Those I'm going to put up front. I 3D printed a cup holder to just kind of mock up and see what I think of it. I'm not going to actually use that particular one, but basically if I put a cup holder in, it's going to have to be off-center towards the driver over here. That's really going to be the only place that I can fit one. I could maybe try to put something back here more centered, but I don't think I like that because that's going to interfere with resting your arm on the center console. So I think that this is ultimately going to be the best spot for it. I'm not going to put anything in just at this moment, but what I think I'm going to end up doing is I'm probably going to leave the transmission tunnel uncovered for the moment, because when the seats bolt down, those will still be easily removable with just a few bolts. And so I think I'm going to end up wanting to do that, pull them back out after I make sure that everything seems like it's working properly, and there's no reason for me to think I'm going to have to mess around with the transmission tunnel items again. Back here, you can see a couple of things. Well, I guess maybe first up here, I got my kill switch up installed and set up. That is permanently mounted, and wiring back here is mostly done. I have to get the little resistor that goes to ground to help with the kill function of it. I don't have the fuse box or these big main fuses for the overall electrical system and the air conditioning. Those are not bolted down yet, but I'm going to wait to do that until I finish the wiring that comes towards the back here. One thing I'll note is that the rear carpet that covers both this upper parcel shelf and then also the lower, that is a single piece. I cut it here partially because this is something I needed to do just to get continue moving forward up on this part here, but also because with the air conditioning compressor that I've got, I'm going to have to make a cutout in this lower part anyway, and I think it ends up being easier to just deal with that carpet separately when I get to it. So next thing is going to be putting the car in the air and then try to finish up the wiring and hose attachments and all that heading towards the back, and then we'll figure out what else I've messed up. So I've had a minor issue that I'm trying to avoid fixing, and that makes this a good time to do an update. So I was really unhappy with how I decided to route these wires, and looking back on it, I'm really not entirely sure why I did it this way, probably just because it was easy right then. But these are all the wires that are going front to back, and the problem with them is that it creates this really long routing that involves going partway under the trunk and then coming back around over here. What I decided was going to be a whole lot cleaner and also help out with the fact that some of the wires were a bit too short was drill a hole right up there, kind of behind the driver's side seat belts. And I did that, but in the process I neglected to note the brake line right there that I nicked. The good part is that there's enough leftover brake line. I had enough excess that I can cut off the bad part, do a double flare, and I should be able to get that fixed. Bought a double flaring toolkit for this. I've never done it before, so we'll see how I do. And then I can finish routing the wires. In the meantime, I've been doing some other cleanup work. So I did the ballast resistor as part of the kill switch that is going to be what ends up grounding the engine to the electrical system to the main vehicle ground if I have to use this kill switch to shut things off, and that ensures that everything goes off and it doesn't just keep going with the alternator. The other thing that I discovered is that my holes that I drilled perfectly centered, or almost perfectly centered, for the battery hold down end up being problematic because, as you can see if you look carefully on the forward one, it's basically right in line with those connectors that come off the back of the kill switch. So I'm going to have to drill new holes a little bit one way or the other, and I'm going to put the battery in and figure out where it makes the most sense to do that here in a little bit. I may do that sooner if I decide that I want to put things off more. Other thing I did was I drilled down both these main fuses as well as the fuse block holder. And let me show you a couple other things. So my seat belts are now fully in and tightened down. The seats are physically in place, but I have not bolted them down. And I also have to drill holes to go to have the seat heater wiring come through back here. So I know where I want to put those. I just have to go through and drill them. And then over here, you might notice that I got the air conditioning bird box cover on, and you may notice I use screws for this instead of rivets or something else. The reason I did this was because this is really not any kind of a structural part, but I do want to potentially have the ability to take it off. I think reality is if I have to service anything in here, it's going to be a tremendous pain, and I'm going to have to get the body off of the car, but I don't want to have to drill out rivets on top of that. There are a few things that could need to be serviced in here. There's the heater core, the evaporator, there's also the expansion valve for the air conditioning, and then there's a couple of heater core hoses. So not a great setup from that perspective, but again, I'd rather be able to have a chance of getting it out with a little bit less headache. Hopefully I will never need to touch it. I've done a couple of other little details, like I had a zip tie over here for these heater core hoses, and I put a cushion clamp on. A couple areas I probably will need to address. I see this, the heater core hoses touching here on the fuel pressure regulator outlet hose. So that's not what you want. I will take care of that maybe after first drive. And then maybe last thing, you can see I put the horns in, and also I did a little bit of routing for the wiring. So making some good progress. I'm trying to get as many details done as I can, but not get too caught up in the idea of getting everything perfectly right. There will be more opportunities to continue to work on stuff, and there's no end to the tweaking that can be done. And really at this point, I want to get the thing on the road and start actually being able to drive it. I can make it better later. So, all right, I've been waiting around long enough. Time to actually go fix this brake line. Well, I didn't do a good job of recording what I was doing here, but the car is now ready for its first go-kart, minus two little items. I got to put the spring washers in the steering column, and I'm going to put a new positive battery terminal on that cable there. And then it's ready to go. I should first probably go over a couple of things that I've done to prepare for this. Obviously, the biggest thing is that I've actually gone through and done the majority of the work on building the car, with the exception of the bodywork, and that's detailed in my other videos. But I also wanted to make sure that everything was safe. So I've done an initial alignment. I've double checked the tightness of all of the bolts that are critical, like the suspension and things like that. I've gone through and I've greased all of the Zerk fittings on the front and rear suspension. The seat belts are installed. The seats are installed as well. I've got a fire extinguisher. One thing to note is that the fuel filler neck is going to flop down if you don't have it secured somehow, which is why I have this ratchet strap here. I have things that are temporarily zip tied because there's not a place for them. For example, down there is the wiring for the rear lights, and I've got similar up in front. But otherwise, this car is really pretty much complete and in good condition. First go-kart, I'm really excited, and you're just going to have to wait to the next video to see how it goes. Thanks for watching.